Hey guys, welcome to Screen Fever. My name's Adam Barnard, and today I'm joined again by the affable Robert Yaniz Jr. to discuss some pretty cool Kevin Smith news. Moose Jaws finally has its financing. Moose Jaws is the third film in the True North trilogy designed by Kevin Smith that kicked off with Tusk in 2014. And just a couple days ago on the Fat Man on Batman podcast, Smith said that they had finally secured the financing necessary to go forward with the film. The quote reads, "Moose Jaws, we have the money for it. Isn't that crazy stuff? That just happened in the last 2 weeks. More when I know, and I'll know very soon." So, Robert, how do you feel about this news, and are you excited about the final film of the trilogy?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of Kevin Smith since, the Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back days and, the early part of the View Askew universe. So even though, these films are definitely a dramatic change of pace for him, he's often asked about, you should do a Star Wars movie, you should do a Marvel movie. But his rationale is always that he wants to make Kevin Smith movies, and these very much feel like films that no one else will make. And for that alone, I really admire his dedication to making these things happen. As neither of the first two have done well theatrically, but he's been really able to just keep this going just because he's got such a following. And I'm interested to see that vision sort of come to fruition with this third film.
Yeah, and Moose Jaws is described very much as a literal interpretation of its title, which is, he says the movie is Jaws, but like a moose, and they even have a piece of concept art where, you know it better than I do, Robert. What does it look like?
It's basically a visual aid that they were, I guess, taking around to try and get financing for the film. It's basically the Jaws poster with antlers on the shark. and like a wheat field superimposed on the bottom where there normally is like the ocean or whatever. So it's just a direct parody of the iconic Jaws poster.
And yeah, with these movies from the True North trilogy, they're not light like maybe Clerk's was, for example. Like some of them, or some parts of them, are genuinely horrific. Like specifically, I'm thinking in Tusk. Like a lot of it is played for satire and laughs and kind of a bro stoner Canadian comic book culture, and then it just gets disgusting and bloody and terrifying and psychologically thrilling. And it's something that, like, I think if any less experienced genre-bending filmmaker would try to do, he would just fall flat on his face. And to be fair, a lot of people don't like these movies. I mean, many critics have argued that Yoga Hosers and Tusk have fallen face-planted and not had the desired effect. I'm in the very unique section of the population that genuinely enjoys both movies for what they are, both Tusk and Yoga Hosers. Again, like, we're in an age, I was just talking with Jackson on the podcast, like, we're in an age where there's so many movies that are like blockbuster movies, and so many movies that are starting to blend together. Like, I mean, we had just a couple mornings ago, we had the Lego movie trailer, we had Mortal Engines, and the Bumblebee trailer all in the same morning. And these are big action movies. Sometimes we're going to get 3 big action movies in a month, and it's like, yes, they're all different, and yes, they're all very good, but like there is such a lack of originality and risk-taking and sitting down in a movie and genuinely having fun because it's different and because it's absolutely batshit insane, like Tusk. And that's something that, like, I still enjoy. I mean, what did you think of Tusk and Yoga Hosers?
Well, I was listening to the Smodcast episode where I don't know if you know this, but Tusk actually started because him and his friend, former producing partner Scott Mosier, were just reading this crazy story about a man that placed an ad in a newspaper. It was a satirical one, they later found out, but as basically wanting wanting a roommate, but having the requirement that he had to dress up in a walrus costume at like certain times of day or certain days or whatever. There was like a schedule, I guess, he had in mind. And so that's based on that alone, Kevin sort of spitballing, like, wouldn't that be fucked up if, about a movie about a guy that literally turns another man into another walrus, and he's and they're laughing during the whole thing and just
Yeah.
spitballing this crazy body horror movie. And I guess at the end of it, he was like, you know what? He smoked his morning joint and just was like banged out a script really fast, and that ended up happening. And so I feel like I've sort of been entrenched in this trilogy from the beginning, just because I was a part of that, hashtag walrus yes or hashtag walrus no.
The
He even like
campaign,
had people
yeah.
respond, yeah, via Twitter I guess gauge his fan base's feedback, whether or not he should even bother with it.
I think like what I like about Kevin Smith is his sense of like possibility and manifesting all these strange destinies.
Absolutely.
I mean, Clerk was the fact that that movie got made, period, and also got made so damn well is just a feat of nature. Like, I mean, this is a guy who was working at a convenience store and was borderline broke, and he still managed to loan enough money to finance a movie that he shot during the night hours because he was working during the day. So he went for weeks and weeks not getting any sleep because he was shooting a movie and still working a minimum wage job at the convenience store. And like, this is another one of these situations where it's like, so many people will get stoned and have a podcast and talk about making a movie, but so few of them are actually going to go out and do it. And like, it's that sense, I think, where he has an idea, he just says, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to find a way to do it. And he has the brand. He's worked hard enough to cultivate both the creative acumen to be able to work on projects at an abnormally and inhumanly fast rate, and also an impetus to achieve these very strange and niche ideas. And he does seem to balance that with having more commercially viable properties, like, or what seemed like it with like Cop Out, or Red State, or even with like the TV shows he's directing now.
Yeah, and I think it was also the perfect storm of his negative experience working on Cop Out, and then kind of the liberation he had working on Red State, that he just embraced this new philosophy of, well, I'm just going to make whatever crazy stuff I want. I'm not even going to try to be part of the studio system anymore. I'm just going to start my own production company and do my own thing. And he's, and to his credit, he's achieved that. He's made films. These movies that started in his head now exist. And, I think Tusk actually is much more consistent overall than Yoga Hosers. I feel
Sure, yeah, I agree.
I feel like Yoga Hosers is a little, it's kind of the whole concept of the little bratwurst Nazis sort of is off the rails to begin with. I think Tusk actually achieves a better balance between comedy and horror, and kind of just the oddity of what that film is trying to go for. But I mean, regardless of the fact that the films are maybe not his best work, he's out there and he's getting it done. And so I really admire him as a creative person who has numerous things that I've been trying to do for an untold number of years. To see somebody who just has an idea and goes for it and makes it happen is really inspiring, I think.
Yeah, I think like, again, some of these criticisms feel like they're born out of jealousy of Kevin Smith. Because like Fandom has such a strong sense of ownership nowadays. I mean, just look at Star Wars if you need an example after The Last Jedi. Yeah, and so like when a person or a brand strays from someone's perception of what it should be, it's like they want to whip it back in line and say, no, you can't do that. And I think that Kevin Smith is this true free creative spirit, because he's like, if I want to make a movie with my daughter and my friends, my best friend's daughter, and have it be about Canadian store clerks fighting Nazi bratwursts, like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, that's just so absolutely nuts. Like, that, it's something that just, I respect the artistry of it, and that sounds insane, I know, but like, you have to look at each movie. I always look at each movie or creative project and say, with what it was intending to do, what it was conceived to make the audience feel, or to entertain the audience, or to tell a certain kind of story or highlight a certain culture. Like, again, how Yoga Hosers highlights a very unique kind of geek Canadian humor satire culture.
Right.
Does it accomplish that? And Yoga Hosers, I mean, the third act kind of flies off the rails because it focuses too much on the Nazi bratwurst stuff, but like, the characters are just as quirky and engaging as they were in his earlier work, for me at least, and that goes for both Yoga Hosers and Tusk.
And he's said a long time that, Strange Brew and the SCTV sketches and things like that were a big inspiration for Jay and Silent Bob, and that that sort of aesthetic. So it makes sense that he's kind of embracing his Canadian influence, and he's a huge hockey fan, obviously.
Yeah.
In this trilogy of films.
So another crazy part about his filmography is the fact that a lot of it is connected within a shared universe, so to speak. And it's something that, of course, we see in blockbusters or the MonsterVerse, putting King Kong and Godzilla together and stuff, but like you don't see it as much on such a small level. And so it's pretty cool because in terms of recurring characters or themes, this isn't the only project he has that taps into an existing universe he's created.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's with Jay and Silent Bob, which he's wisely actually kept the rights to those characters. So they're supposed to pop up in Moose Jaws at some point as well.
That's so cool.
I know it is so cool. It's connecting his two worlds. It's I mean, he's kept them alive through with his first 5 or 6 films, I believe, and then Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Clerks 2, and now they actually are going to be coming back for Jay and Silent Bob reboot, so he can do his take on the reboot, sequel remake culture that we're currently living in. So I think it's always really impressive that he seems like he's constantly talking about new projects or things that he's trying to get made, and some of them fall through and some of them come to fruition, but he keeps plugging at it every single day at trying to get more things in the queue, basically.
Yeah, and these are characters, like especially Jay and Silent Bob, that have existed since like 94, I guess, when Clerks came out, which, I mean, that's longer than I've been alive. Like these characters existed before I was conceived. That's how old they are. And so it's like, it's super cool that someone like Kevin Smith is able to keep going. I do wish he would do some more dramatic stuff, because one of my complaints with Yoga Hosers is there was some really interesting, even satire or comedy that got undercut by too much goofiness. I think, and to that point, I think Tusk itself was genuinely terrifying at parts. I mean, I didn't know what I was in for. The trailers. Oh, here's the crazy thing I forgot to mention. That was my introduction to Kevin Smith. The very first Kevin Smith movie I saw was in my sophomore year of film school, which was in theaters, and it was Tusk. And I knew somewhat about Kevin Smith and the enigma that he is, but I didn't quite know in a very intimate sense like I would experience in the theater. Everyone in my grade who saw Tusk in theaters, and there was a good amount of them, hated it. And my writing partner and I, Jackson Smith, who I do the main podcast with on our channel, loved it. Like, it both ignited our interest in Kevin Smith. So we weren't comparing it to Chasing Amy or Jay and Silent Bob or Clerks or
right.
Or
you didn't have that.
Or Mallrats even.
It,
yeah. It was just like, this is absolutely original and batshit crazy. And they played that Smodcast segment in the credits, the one where he's discussing what should we do? Wouldn't it be funny if this and that? And then we'll have him in the third act where he's in a enclosure crying and he's been converted to a walrus. And it just was so bizarre. And like, as someone who was younger at the time, like, it was impressionable for me because I'm still learning about film and what you can do, and especially independent artists were inspiring for me because these are people that there's no difference between me and them besides like a few years of age and a small amount of financing for the project. So like, it was that potential and that wildly uncontained creative spark that pulled me into his work. And then I caught up. Like, at this point, Chasing Amy is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, I think it's the best movie he's done, and I think it's an absolute masterpiece. And so I've been in its own right pulled into other movies that he's done. But it all started with Tusk and part of the True North trilogy.
Interesting. Yeah, that's what a way to discover his filmography. Yeah, for me, I think Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was one of the first ones I saw, and then went back and rewatched caught up with everything and kind of been on board more or less since then. I think even with Jersey Girl, which a lot of people think is a terrible film, it's not that bad. It's fine. I at this point I'm really invested because I do listen to the podcast, and I have seen him live a couple times. I'm pretty invested in what he has going on, but it's because his passion for this stuff is so infectious.
Yeah, his energy is boundless, and welcoming and so optimistic. I mean, he just recently had a heart attack, and that was quite scary for him because he was very close to actually dying, and he's still like, he took a few weeks to recover and he's back at it. Like, he's, in many ways, he's inspiring, and like I said earlier before just right before we started recording, like, he is the most paradoxically productive person in the whole universe, with the energy he's have. Like, when I smoke weed, I'm on the couch for like 6 hours and I don't want to do anything the next day. So like, whatever magic he's tapped into is quite incredible as an artist.
Yeah, meanwhile, he's writing like several scripts, apparently, has a stack of them.
Well, go ahead and let us know what you guys think about Moose Jaws and this culmination of the trilogy, and what you thought of the earlier films like Tusk and Yoga Hosers. I'm just very excited. It's just something that I want to kind of do my part to put in the limelight, because like, I genuinely believe in Kevin Smith, and I genuinely believe that a satire of a Steven Spielberg blockbuster as a moose is just a great idea, and it's something that's going to capture the excitement of Tusk that I felt in an entirely different way, and with some different characters. Like, the guy from Epic Mealtime is going to be in it. Like,
oh, wow.
It's crazy. Like, he had a small part as a security guard in Tusk, which is kind of planting him. So it's again, like, the fact of the matter is, as long as Kevin Smith stays excited about these movies and tries absolutely crazy crap, like, I'll probably keep coming back. And I'm glad we got you, because it turns out you're a huge Kevin Smith fan, probably even more so than me. And I was struggling to find someone besides Jackson to do this who I knew would have the Kevin Smith aficionado bend.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to seeing how he does as far as, satirizing Jaws and just kind of bringing this corner of his filmography to presumably a close. And I'm also interested to see what he comes up with next. I mean, he's always talking about one thing or another that he's working on. So as you've alluded to, he literally can go from ridiculous horror comedy to like really kind of grounded drama in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's it's always interesting to see what he has coming down the pipe.
Certainly. Well, go ahead and follow Robert on Twitter or at his Crooked Table website, where he hosts his own podcast and talk show. Thank you again for coming on, man. I've loved both the conversations we've had, and I hope to have you on again at some point in the future.
Absolutely. We'll have to do this again soon.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us, guys. We'll see you later.